Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this. There is someone who is never far from your thoughts, someone who occupies your mind at the most unexpected moments, whose absence somehow feels more powerful than their presence. The strangest part, you haven't spoken to them in days, weeks, or maybe even months, yet their presence is ever so real to you, lingering in the corners of your mind. Have you ever wondered what it means when someone is always there, even without the need for communication? Does it feel like an unspoken bond, or is it merely a sign of emotional attachment that refuses to be forgotten? Tonight, we will explore something that goes beyond words, beyond the need to constantly check your phone for a message or a call. Tonight, we will look into the spaces between us, where connection is not forged in conversations, but in the mere act of being in thought, being in silence, being in the flow of the moment. This feeling, this experience, is not an accident. It speaks to something deep within us. It speaks to the human condition, to how our emotions work in ways we cannot always control. When you find someone always on your mind, it's not necessarily a reflection of how much you want them there, but how deeply they have embedded themselves in the very essence of your thoughts. And perhaps therein lies the real question: what is it about them, about you, about this connection that makes it feel so unavoidable? This is not a case of mere memory or nostalgia. This is an ongoing, silent communication. And here lies the paradox. The more you try to push them out, the more they return, filling the empty spaces in your mind. In this speech, we will delve into what it means to have someone so present in your life, despite the lack of direct interaction. We will look at the power of unspoken words, the energy of thoughts, and the freedom in letting go of control over who and what stays with you. So stay with me as we unpack this complex, sometimes perplexing experience. When someone is constantly in your thoughts, even without any communication, it can feel like an overwhelming presence. There is a sense of something unspoken, lingering in the quiet spaces of your mind, where words are absent but the connection remains palpable. This is not a typical form of connection. It's a bond formed in the depths of the mind, one that transcends the physical realm of conversation, gestures, and eye contact. The absence itself can be more intense than any presence, and therein lies a paradox. The more distant someone is, the more profound their effect on us can be. The mind doesn't just forget or ignore easily. It clings, almost instinctively, to the person who has left an imprint. Often we think of communication as being essential to connection. We believe that without the exchange of words, gestures, or actions, the bond between people fades. Yet, what happens when this isn't the case? What happens when someone remains ever present in your thoughts and you haven't spoken to them in a long time? This phenomenon suggests that there is something deeper than mere verbal communication happening between individuals. The mind doesn't let go easily, especially when it has attached itself to a certain person. There are moments when you are not even actively thinking of them, yet your mind, almost as if on its own accord, drifts back to them. Their absence, far from weakening the bond, strengthens it in an unexpected way. This constant presence without communication is a reflection of the power of thought and memory. Our minds are intricate and complex, and they don't easily forget the impressions made on them, especially when those impressions come from someone significant. The thoughts we have are not merely random, fleeting ideas. They are pieces of energy that shape the emotional landscape of our existence. This energy can become a force that maintains the presence of someone in our life, even in silence. It is not always the need for words or physical interaction that keeps us connected. It's the silent thread that exists between minds, unbroken by time or distance. The absence of communication does not necessarily mean a disconnection. In fact, it can deepen the bond between two people, creating an invisible space that fills itself with memories, emotions, and reflections. This kind of connection is not reliant on the tangible. It is born from the subtle, the unseen. It speaks to a deeper form of communication that doesn't require words, and yet it often speaks louder than any conversation could ever hope to. When someone occupies your mind without any direct communication, it challenges the conventional idea that connections between people are formed solely through interaction. We often believe that to maintain a relationship or to keep someone in our lives, we need to be in constant touch, exchanging words, texts, or calls. However, when someone is always in your thoughts without any recent communication, it presents a different kind of reality. It forces us to question what truly sustains a connection. Is it the absence of words, or is it something deeper, something that doesn't need verbal confirmation to thrive? In these moments, the absence becomes an integral part of the relationship. It's easy to think that silence creates distance, that not hearing from someone means they are slipping away from your life. Yet in these silent spaces, something quite the opposite can happen. The absence of communication does not necessarily diminish the bond, it can enhance it. It is in this space where the mind continues to reach out, where thoughts of the other person don't fade into oblivion but instead seem to grow stronger over time. The more you try to suppress these thoughts, the more persistent they become, as if your mind is holding on to them for a reason you can't quite articulate. This phenomenon highlights the paradox that sometimes it's not the words exchanged that keep a person alive in your heart, but the unspoken, the moments that were never said aloud, the emotions that passed between the two of you but weren't necessarily verbalized. This type of connection goes beyond physical proximity or consistent interaction. It exists in the quiet moments, the reflections, the memories. Thoughts, after all, are powerful. They are like a stream of energy flowing through your consciousness, and when they are persistent, they can reshape your entire emotional state. What we often fail to realize is that this kind of connection, this constant mental presence, can be just as meaningful, if not more so, than communication through words. The energy of thought alone can create a presence that lingers long after the person has left the scene, even when there is no need for further conversation. It's in this mental space where feelings are cultivated and the connection grows even in silence. It's not always about the need to talk or check in. It's about the way someone has embedded themselves into your mental and emotional world, leaving behind a trace that refuses to be forgotten. When someone is always on your mind without any direct communication, it reveals the powerful nature of thoughts as energy. Thoughts are not just fleeting mental notes or passing distractions. They are forces that shape our emotions and ultimately our behavior. This energy is subtle yet impactful, like a current running through us, influencing how we feel and act. Just as physical energy can move and change things in the material world, the energy created by thoughts has the ability to mold the internal landscape of our consciousness. This energy doesn't disappear simply because there's no spoken word. Instead, it persists, affecting your mood, your outlook, and your emotional state. Our minds don't just store memories, they store the emotional residue of those memories as well. When someone has made a significant impact on us, whether through love, friendship, or any form of emotional connection, their presence is not confined to the time you spent together. It extends beyond those moments, lingering in the form of thoughts, memories, and feelings. These thoughts are not passive. They create an energy within us that resonates long after the person has physically left our life. The more significant the person is to us, the more intense this energy becomes. It's like the force of a magnet, pulling us back into thoughts of them, even when we consciously try to divert our attention. This energy is not something we can control. We may attempt to focus on other things or distance ourselves from the thought of the person, but the energy is there, subtly shifting our focus, creating a mental presence that we cannot easily escape. It may manifest as a fleeting thought during the day, an image in our minds at night, or an emotional response triggered by something as simple as a song or a familiar scent. These moments are not coincidental. They are the remnants of the energy that this person has left in our consciousness, continuing to reverberate through us. The power of this energy is also why the absence of communication does not necessarily equate to a lack of connection. Even when words are not exchanged, the energy of thought persists. It becomes a silent communication, a form of exchange that doesn't require language, Thoughts are powerful enough to sustain an invisible connection that no external interaction is necessary to maintain. This form of mental and emotional energy doesn't fade easily. It remains, constantly shaping our emotional world and reminding us of the people who have made a lasting impression, even if they are no longer physically present. The boundaries of communication often seem clear cut. You speak to someone, they respond, and through this exchange, connection is formed. Words are powerful, shaping how we understand and relate to one another. But what happens when communication isn't present, when there are no words exchanged, yet the bond still persists? This brings us to a deeper consideration of the boundaries of communication, an exploration of the connection that exists beyond verbal exchanges. The truth is, communication isn't confined to words alone. It encompasses everything we convey through our presence, our energy, and even the spaces between us. When someone is constantly in your thoughts without direct communication, it is as if a deeper, unspoken form of communication is at play. This is not the typical back and forth of conversation, but a more subtle, almost intuitive exchange. There are no texts, no phone calls, no letters, but the presence of the person still lingers in your mind. This kind of connection transcends the limits of verbal language, relying instead on the silent understanding that exists between two people. It may be the unspoken feelings that were never fully expressed or the energy exchanged in a shared moment now carried forward in the mind. This absence of communication doesn't signal the end of the bond, it's merely a different form of interaction. The space between words, the moments when no direct exchange occurs, often hold the most profound sense of connection. There are times when we feel understood without speaking a word. It is in these moments that we tap into a form of communication that goes beyond verbal expressions. In the silence, there can be understanding. In the quiet, the connection can become even more powerful because it is not reliant on what is said, but rather on the deeper recognition of what is felt. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this unspoken communication is how it still manages to influence us. The mere thought of someone can carry the weight of entire conversations, memories, and shared experiences. You might not have heard from this person for days, but their presence continues to inform your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. It is a testament to the power of nonverbal communication, the understanding that exists not through words, but through the silent space we share, a space that is just as meaningful as any spoken sentence. The boundaries of communication are not as rigid as we often believe. They extend into the realms of silence, thought, and unspoken connection, where the presence of another can be felt without the need for verbal exchange. When someone lingers in your thoughts without the need for verbal communication, it speaks to the complexity of love and attachment in silence. We often think of love and attachment as being fueled by communication, gestures, and physical presence, but this idea fails to capture the full depth of emotional bonds. Love doesn't always need to be expressed through words or actions. Sometimes it exists in the spaces where no conversation takes place. It resides in the thoughts that carry someone's presence with you, even when they are not physically there. This love is not bound by the limitations of time or space. It persists in the quietest, most subtle ways. Attachment, in this context, is not about being in constant contact or having frequent interactions. Instead, it is about how deeply a person has embedded themselves in your emotional landscape. When you think of someone who hasn't communicated with you in a while, yet they remain a fixture in your mind, it reflects the quiet strength of that attachment. It suggests that love and emotional connection are not always about active participation in each other's lives. Sometimes they live on in the absence of words, in the silence that fills the spaces between you. The connection endures even when the physical or verbal exchanges fade. What makes this kind of connection so profound is the way it highlights the power of emotional resonance. You don't need constant communication to feel the weight of someone's presence. The emotional bond you share with that person transcends the limitations of time and conversation. It exists in the memories, the shared experiences, and even the thoughts that arise without warning. When someone is in your thoughts without communication, it's as if the emotional tie between you both has formed its own language, one that doesn't require words to be understood. It's the recognition that someone can still be part of your life in a deeply emotional way, even if they are not actively involved in it. This silent form of attachment also speaks to the nature of love itself. Love is not always about constant expression. It is often about the quiet, unspoken moments that pass between two people. When you can feel someone in your thoughts, even without them reaching out to you, it's a testament to the endurance of the bond that has been created. Love, in its truest form, is not always about what is said, but rather about what is felt in the quietest of moments, in the stillness of thought, where no words are needed to maintain a deep and enduring connection. The idea of letting go of the need for constant communication when someone is always in your mind is a profound concept that speaks to emotional freedom. We live in a world where communication is instantaneous and constant, where staying connected through messages, social media, and calls has become almost a requirement for maintaining relationships. However, when someone occupies your thoughts without the need for frequent communication, it forces us to reconsider what truly keeps us emotionally tethered to others. It's an invitation to explore a different kind of connection, one that doesn't rely on the constant flow of words or updates, but instead exists in the space between the communications. Letting go of the need for constant communication doesn't mean letting go of the person or the bond you share with them. Instead, it's about recognizing that the connection can exist on a deeper, more subtle level, beyond the immediate need to talk or check in. Sometimes, the strongest relationships are not those built on an unbroken chain of communication, but on the quiet understanding that even in silence, the bond remains unshaken. When someone is constantly in your thoughts, their presence is still felt, even when there are no direct exchanges. This realization allows you to let go of the pressure to constantly communicate, understanding that the connection is not fragile and does not need to be constantly nurtured with words. There is a certain freedom that comes with letting go of this need. It allows you to experience a more profound and genuine connection, where you are not bound by the expectations of communication, but can appreciate the bond for what it is, something that exists not in the physical world, but in the world of thought and emotion. It gives you the space to appreciate the person's presence in your life without feeling the need for constant affirmation. In this way, you are free to feel deeply without the constraints of time or communication, trusting that the connection is sustained by something more enduring. Moreover, letting go of the need for constant communication opens up room for emotional growth. It allows you to process your thoughts and feelings without the need for immediate feedback or validation from the other person. It teaches you to rely on the internal, self-sustained connection that exists within you and the other person, rather than depending on the external markers of communication. This kind of freedom doesn't diminish the relationship, rather, it strengthens it by allowing it to exist in its purest form, one that is not dependent on the constant exchange of words, but on the enduring power of thought and emotional connection. In conclusion, the experience of having someone always in your mind without any communication speaks to the profound nature of human connection. It reveals that relationships are not solely sustained by words or constant interaction, but by the deeper, often unseen bonds that exist within the realm of thought, memory, and emotion. These silent connections can be just as powerful, if not more so, than verbal exchanges. The energy of thought, the quiet attachment, and the unspoken communication all contribute to a presence that remains even in the absence of words. When we let go of the need for constant communication, we open ourselves up to a more liberated form of connection, one that exists beyond time, distance, and the constraints of conversation. It is in this freedom that we come to understand the true depth of our emotional ties, recognizing that love, attachment, and understanding can transcend the need for verbal validation. These silent bonds, often stronger than we realize, carry the weight of an enduring connection, reminding us that the most meaningful relationships are not always the ones that require constant upkeep, but those that live on in the quiet spaces of our minds and hearts.